Great. Thank you so much to all of you especially for sharing those touching family photos. That was really great. As President Christian mentioned in her comments, we have seen a barrage of different negative actions that have given us pause and so much information. So much has happened since the pandemic, and there's a constant influx of information about what is happening in the world. The second question I have for all four of you is, as a mother, what do you see as a threat? What is the threat? And we'll go ahead and get started with you, Antoinette.
Yeah, so, as I mentioned in my introduction, my son is 2 years old, and the things that we're teaching him right now and kind of modeling for him are, topics such as, sharing is caring and be nice to your friends. His granny came up with this saying that we literally say to him every morning before he goes to preschool, and it's no fighting, no biting. But basically, we're trying to teach him how to be a good person and how to be a caring friend. And, once he gets a little older, we will start teaching him how to love and embrace differences amongst his peer group. As a mom, one thing that breaks my heart, and although we will be teaching him how to love those that are different than him, at some point we're going to have that conversation with him that it may not always be reciprocated. And that I see is definitely one of a threat, and just something that definitely gives me heartburn as a mom. And that, there may be people that treat him differently because of things that he can't control, like the color of his skin. It breaks my heart to think about his innocence and how much joy he has because of his ability to be able to see the world through rose-colored glasses. And I think there's beauty in that, and I want to protect that as much as I can. However, there definitely is going to come a time when he realizes the reality of our current climate. I vividly remember when I was about 6 or 7, I came home from school bawling one day because some kids that I consider friends called me Blackie, and they referred to me as being a skillet because of how dark my skin color is. And I remember not really being able to grasp the why of that. And I remember telling my parents, crying, those are my friends, those are my friends. And I remember my parents having to sit me down and have that really tough conversation with me. And the thought about having to have that same conversation with Braxton about the racial inequities, the lack of empathy that's shown, the intolerance of differences, the inability to be able to disagree, but yet remain in good standing with one another. Those are what I consider threats and things that definitely break my heart. I'll pass it over to Sandy.
Thank you, Antoinette. As a mother, I think, I see continued racism and xenophobia as both imminent threats. I think it's been really challenging, being a new mother, not only during a pandemic, but then also tied to that is this rise in violence against Asian Americans. And, like I had said previously, I identify as Chinese American. And that's been really difficult to watch and, be a new mother in this type of space. I've just seen regurgitations and recycling of old stereotypes that, we should be done away with, yet they are resurfacing at rapid pace. And we see all over the country since 2020, since the beginning of this pandemic, that people of Asian descent are being blamed for the virus. And we see acts of violence everywhere related to this. We saw last year, this family, this father with 2 sons shopping in Texas. And this person, thought in his mind that these people, because of what they look like, were the root cause of a virus. And so he physically attacked all 3 of them, including the young children. And we've seen cases like this throughout 2020 and now into 2021. And to be honest, I've lost track of all of the different instances because I can't continue to watch it. And there's a feeling of guilt there too when I say that, because I'm not experiencing the physical violence, and I shouldn't turn it off, because I should recognize that these things are happening, and I should be sharing and amplifying the voices of these victims and survivors. But I'm seeing this, and then I look at my son, and he's 10 months old with such innocence. And to know that he is growing up in his first year of life with all of this, it's really challenging. And I see those types of issues as threats. And I've shared with many friends that, I took a walk, just a normal walk around my own neighborhood with my son several months ago in the fall. And I just will never forget walking along in our own neighborhood as we passed by this house with this man outside. He's speaking on the phone. And as we pass, he suddenly talks very loudly. He is sharing with the other person on the other line, at the end of the line, this just very, and I won't repeat what was said, but just this very racist language, this rhetoric that's very hateful towards people of Chinese descent, and tying that to, again, COVID-19. And you can imagine as a mother, as I'm pushing my baby in his stroller, walking by this house, a house in our own neighborhood, and feeling this sense of frustration and sadness. And this is a neighborhood that my parents come and take my son on walks for. I'm just so tired of holding my breath and wondering, if I don't go with them, is something going to happen? So I think really racism and xenophobia are imminent threats to peace, to safety, to everyone's well-being. And with that, I'll pass it along to Evan.
Thank you, Sandy. That was touching. And along those same lines, I think what's most heartbreaking to me is watching my daughter grow. And when she was a baby, I was able to control her environment, right? You keep them around family, you feed them only the foods that you're wanting to expose them to. You're able to create this controlled environment. And as she's gotten older, she's gone to school. She's learning more. Her language has developed exponentially. We watch the news, and she's understanding things that before, she could be playing with a Barbie dream house and it didn't mean anything. She looks at those same images and she hears those words now, and they suddenly have context and they have meaning. And I see this 5-year-old who is trying to understand all of the things that are happening. And, the last couple of years, I think for everyone, especially mothers, parents, have been extremely challenging. I think they're challenging as adults, let alone when you think about raising our children. And the biggest threat for me has been the polarization. I think there has been so much division and hatred, and it's racism, it is classism, you see it, sexism, you see it everywhere. And there's such a lack of empathy in this world that we're trying to raise our children in. And it just makes me think to, one of the nights when my husband and I are watching TV, and we always have something kind of going on in the background, and my daughter sees a BLM protest, and there's a protester and he's holding the sign with a picture of George Floyd. My daughter looks at me and she said, "Who is that?" She's 6 years old. I'm not ready for that conversation yet. I didn't think it was coming, and I didn't know what to say. And I just paused and I kind of said, tried to figure it out in my head. And then I just told her, I said, "That was someone's son." And, it's a difficult conversation to have. But as she grows, as she learns how to navigate this world, those are things that that are happening, and they're not just happening in our country. There are issues with globally. I'm sure you guys have seen, and if any of you guys are my Facebook friends, you've heard a lot about the farmers' protests in India, and that's something that just resonates very close to home. And when my daughter sees us, talking and listens to the conversations about that, I talk to her and she goes, well, why are they protesting? Why are they out there? And we're talking about people that for 4 months have left their homes, they've left their families, and they've been protesting because they're fighting for their livelihood. They're fighting for their right to be heard in a democratic state. They're fighting for their lifestyle. Farming is not just an occupation, especially in India. In India, it is a true way of life. And when you look at all this, it's to understand. And when she would hear, oh, so-and-so said this about it. And if me and my husband are talking about our disappointments in maybe a comment that was made, or, the response of the government, she just says, well, why don't they care? And I don't have an answer for her. And I think that is the biggest threat, which is all of the challenges we're facing, and how, depending on what we label ourselves at, or where, what we align our belief structure with, that we're forgetting our humanity. So, thank you.
Pavan, I think you made a great point, and what I originally had thought was a great threat, actually, I think the greatest threat really is that we don't turn these obstacles into opportunities. If we don't look at what's happening in our world today and change them, and we have, I believe, especially the women that are on this panel, I know Antoinette, we take our kids to the park on a regular basis. So we really are breaking barriers that, our parents and our grandparents had walls built that we're breaking down. And I really think that the greatest threat for us as mothers right now is that we don't turn these examples and these educational lessons into opportunities for our children to grow and change. Fear and hatred is a real thing that we're dealing with. It's a real thing that we've been dealing with for a long time. But I think the greatest threat is that we don't do anything about it.